We're going to call this show Trade Wars, MAGA, and More because I believe that this all kind of comes together in what I'm about to talk to you about. So on April 2nd, Trump declared Independence Day. He used the eternal rhetoric of eternal grievance. America's been ripped off by everybody, and our industrial base has been hollowed out, and the middle class has been destroyed. And so he put tariffs on 50 countries, many of whom were allies, many of whom had very low tariffs with, and they had very low tariffs to our goods. And that caused the market to, the equity market, to crash. It went down quite a bit. It came back up quite a bit. But finally, what was it, Wednesday, April 9th, Trump took off or paused. He paused all these tariffs, right? He gave a 90-day pause on all these tariffs because the treasury markets were failing. And even as I'm talking to you, there's still trouble in the treasury markets. People aren't buying our debt. And if they don't buy our debt, we can't finance our expenditures. And then the dollar is going to lose its preeminent status as the reserve currency of the world. So this is what Trump caused with his ridiculous tariffs and his language of just eternal and perpetual grievance. This is what he caused. So the treasuries are weakened. He blinked. He backed off, but he still has tariffs on China. I think it's 145%. He just took off tariffs, as you may know, against iPhones, smartphones, and electronics that are made in China. You know, the things that the tech bros, that part of the plutocrats who are favoring him and favoring his project, those products he took the tariffs off of. Okay, but what you have now is it appears to be a trade war with China, and in my mind, it's questionable whether we can win that trade war. I think there's probably a pretty good argument that China will win that trade war because they have huge production capability. They're putting almost $2 trillion into more production and opening up more markets, and they have a lot of markets around the world. But China is also relying on and playing on the idea that they are trustworthy. They're steady, unlike America, which with Trump is proving itself not to be trustworthy. It is proving itself not to be worthy of your confidence. That's why people are taking money out of the treasury markets. And Trump has turned on the allies, put these tariffs on them. I know he lowered them to 10%, but he's attacked our allies with tariffs, with rhetoric. We're talking about taking territory. We're calling them names, all sorts of things. He's attacked our allies. So China has a real good card to play here to say, hey, we're more trustworthy and we're more reliable than the Americans. And this is going to hurt America quite a bit. Now, there was a talk, and you know, the U.S. Trump may very well lose his trade war with China, which I believe will have catastrophic consequences for this country. Now, Stephen Myron is, I believe, is the chief of the Council of Economic Advisors, who advises the president. It's a body of economists who advise the president on various economic matters. He gave a talk on April the 7th, and he talks about a global public order and that the United States provided the currency and the military might as public services. But we want to get paid for it. So he said, you know, you can either build factories in our country or else we'll put up tariffs, he said, or you got to write us a check. But, you know, we can't foot the bill alone. We got to rebuild our manufacturing and all of this stuff. So let's examine what he's talking about. Let's examine, too, in a sense, what Trump is talking about. You know, first of all, um, Myron's an economist, just like Navarro's an economist. And the MAGA mindset, to include a lot of people who are really educated, who should know better, like Patrick Deneen, are attacking economists. Well, but they don't attack these economists. They don't attack Myron and Navarro, right? But they attack every other economist. So this shows a complete partiality, a break from reality, an unreasonableness in the minds of MAGA, that they have an agenda and they're not open to reason. Okay, so let's talk about what is Myron, an economist, and what's Trump, talking about? Well, the language they're using is the language of grievance. What they're saying is directed at the base. It's directed at the 31%, at MAGA. That's who it's directed at, because they can rule with MAGA. They can rule with less than a third of the population. So that's why they talk about things like rebuilding our industrial base, like that's some magic talisman. And there needs to be some work, in some sectors, okay? And then they talk about the middle class being hollowed out. That happened in some cases, in some places. That there needs to be work done there to improve that, but you don't do it by what Trump is proposing, is ham-fisted, heavy-handed, across the board, against the allies approach. Okay, this doesn't work. The better thing for Trump to do, and I'm digressing, I'm going to digress a lot here. The better thing for Trump to do is to get all the allies to stop insulting them, stop threatening the military alliances, and say, look, let's work together about countering China's economic might. Okay, let's work together because China's flooding the markets of the world with manufactured goods. So let's counter that somehow. Let's either make our own, let's take them to court and the World Trade Organization. I know there's some issues there. I'm not going to go into that as far as the merits of such and the characterization of these products. I get that. But still, you have a means by which to address these issues and to do it on a united front. Okay? At the same time, what Trump and the allies need to do is realize that Russia is an ally of China. Okay? So this idea of pivoting to China is a trap. Okay? If you think you're going to make friends with Russia, which is what Witkoff seems to be trying to do in Moscow right now, you're nuts. Because you have to defeat Russia in order to contain and defeat China. So it would be better for Trump to get all the allies, to get all the European countries, all the North American, South American, African countries that are our allies, be friendly with them, work out great agreements and reciprocity with them, and don't tariff them, don't insult them, but work with them, bring them together, oppose Russia by defeating the Russian armies in Ukraine and causing regime change in Moscow. And then you can pivot and deal with China a lot better once Putin's been removed and Russia is being reordered to get rid of this imperialist culture. So this is what he should be doing, but he's not doing that. So we're getting all the talking points, and we got to attack, China in this trade war, which America, quite honestly, may not win for a number of reasons. China's put almost $1.9 trillion into advancing their production and their markets. They got huge markets. They're respected around the world, increasingly so. And they're billing themselves as somebody who you can trust and who's reliable. And that is what's suffering the most right now in regards to America. Traders and other countries are looking at America and saying, you can't trust it. It's not reliable. That's why the treasury markets are tanking. They're in trouble. And that's why Trump blinked on April 9th. That's why he paused the tariffs for 90 days, because the treasury markets were failing. Okay? And at the last time I checked, there's still a problem in the treasury markets. And if you lose the treasury markets, you can't finance your debt. The dollar stops being or is reduced as the reserve currency of the world, and American power declines. Okay, so this is what Donald Trump is doing. A number of economists, I mean, across the whole spectrum, have said that Trump's approach to rebuilding American industry is wrong. There's 17 factors that go into rebuilding industry here in this country, and so all this has to be considered. It's just not it just can't be boiled down to tariffs. It just can't be boiled down to tariffs. And so I believe it was Ed Luce of the Economist came out and said there's no theory that supports what Trump is doing. Mercantilist, reality, there's no theory that supports this. And what you had are trading, a trading system in the world that was actually very beneficial, that helped us a lot. Sure, we could have improved things for some sectors of our population, but it was very beneficial for us. The Chinese were trying to game it. That could have been dealt with by a unified approach by our allies, who are not being alienated, whose trust in our country is not being decreased by Trump's actions. All right. So all this again, it's consistent with Trump, who is a malignant personality, got a gangster mentality. He's in it for himself. He's sympathetic to Russia. He is. I mean, I think he's a Russian asset. It doesn't mean he's an agent. Doesn't mean he's getting paid, but he's an asset. It means they can manipulate him. They can play him. They can use him. Okay, and he probably doesn't know he's being used. So that's what makes him an asset. Yeah, and Trump's history. He comes out of the real estate business, where one author after another has talked about his dealings with organized crime, whether he knew about it or not. Organized crime was always operating close to him. And so Trump is really a very stained individual, and he's causing a lot of problems for this country. He's hurting this country. He repeats a lot of Russian disinformation, and but he's able to keep power because of two reasons. He's got a group of the plutocrats. He's got the tech bros, really rich guys. He's got Musk, richest guy in the world. And then he's got people on the ground, MAGA, okay, the 31%. And if you look at his language and the language of Moran, it goes to the grievance, the eternal grievance, which is what MAGA just loves. They love grievance because they're angry and they want vengeance. And Donald Trump is the revenger in chief. I think he said that. Okay, so there is some resistance out of Trump in the Republican ranks. How effective it's going to be, I don't know. There's some resistance on Wall Street to him. Jamie Dimon, Bill Ackman for a while was against him. One of the Koch brothers filed a lawsuit about the tariffs. So there's some pushback with the Republicans and with some plutocrats and some people who used to support him are starting to realize this is really a bad deal with Trump in there. So that's going on. But you have MAGA, which is, very much his target audience. Whenever he talks, that's who he's talking to. He's not a uniter, he's a divider, and a number of generals have said that. He does that on purpose. He repeats a lot of Russian disinformation. He plays into Russian disinformation. And MAGA likes Russian disinformation. They may not recognize it as that, but it is. These false or partially correct or incomplete narratives that are used to divide and to inflame. These are the things that Trump likes to repeat and MAGA likes to hear. So let's examine MAGA. Let's take a look at MAGA. It's got an ethnic component. It's got a socioeconomic component. Um, over time, I have seen other aspects of MAGA. Um, and so I want to digress a little bit. I'm going to do a lot of digression here, but I want to digress a little bit. You tend to reassess things as more information becomes available to you. And you study more and you talk to more people and so on and so forth. And I think there's only four type of people who never change their assessments. One is God. I mean, God is always right. He's correct, complete, etc. Okay. A lot of people think they're God, but they're not. Okay. Secondly, people with an ideological bent. They got an ideological story they want to put out, and allied with these people are people who just aren't interested intellectually with what's going on. They really don't want to be bothered. They just got their view and they don't want to change. The third I call are lying and dishonest people. They know what the truth is, and they have some dark agenda, that they want to advance. They're getting paid, perhaps, and the Russians pay people for disinformation. Okay, that's what they do. They pay people to lie, and that gets laundered through a number of different categories. There was a lawsuit filed by the Department of Justice in September of last year. Talk about Tenet Media, Tim Pool, and a bunch of other people. And you can find it online. And then finally, the fourth category of person who never changes their position. It's the dead. Okay. Otherwise, you'll probably change your position if you study and you're honest and you want to know the truth. You want to know what's going on. So let's find out what's going on. What's MAGA? Well, um, yeah, it's got an ethnic component. I'm going to go over some of the characteristics of it. Um, I think that it has been largely created, amplified, if you will. Its voice has been amplified by narratives and differences that have been further amplified, further spread by Russian disinformation, by trolls, and by unwitting proponents of these disinformation narratives. They're false or partially true. They're not complete. They're inflammatory. They're meant to divide people. So MAG has come up from a lot of falsehoods, lies, misunderstandings, and you have to go back and re-examine some ideas. You just have to do that, like globalism and globalization. Oh, that's supposed to be bad, right? Is it? Well, look it up. Look at the definition of globalization and globalism, and understand how throughout history people have cooperated from different countries and different societies, and they have worked together for peace. So there's a peaceful component, and there is a development component of globalization and globalism. There's a positive component to this, and this is being demonized, and that is perfectly in line with what Putin would want or Xi would want. They want a multipolar world, which means that they want a world that's broken up into power blocks. Countries who compete for power and wealth, like in 1914, that led, to two world wars after that. So you have these power blocks in Europe, and everybody ended up killing lots of people, and they did it based on religion. They did it based on ethnicity, and that's what the dictators of today are about too. And Trump plays on ethnicity, he plays on religion, and he's of that same mindset. He does not understand the importance of cooperation, the importance, the value of globalization, of globalism, of people cooperating, working together, having a common language, a common method of making things work to bring peace, to share the goods of the world. There's corn in this country, there's uranium in this country, there's fish off the coast of this country. So let's all work together and give us these goods, and we can manufacture here, and we can share these manufactured goods. Let's do that together. That's what globalism and globalization is about. It brought a lot of peace, but of course that's been demonized, and it's been demonized because there have been some dislocations, apparently, as a result of that. Okay, some parts of the population have been dislocated, not only apparently, but in reality, and they should have been better taken care of. But those grievances have been amplified, and they have been spread around by the disinformation narrative. So you have to take a look at these ideas. Okay, so there are what you have with MAGA is a lot of people with unresolved personal grievances. I see this over and over again. I see this with a lot of people who I know. They have some drama or some trauma in their life that's unresolved. Maybe they got a divorce. They didn't get the job they wanted. Their girlfriend had an abortion. They got some physical ailment, some mental ailment. They got some argument. A lot of people I see here got arguments with the church because of some doctrine, or because of something the church is doing, or something about the liturgy or something. So they have these grievances, and they never seem to let them go. They're unresolved, and then what they do is they take these grievances and they look at Donald Trump, who's the revenger in chief, who's going to fix it for everybody. He's going to fix the man in charge, because that's why we're in the state we're in. That's why all this bad stuff's happening to us, because the people in charge. And so Trump is going to say, I'm going to go after the elites. So the elites becomes a bad word, all right? But he's got a whole different set of elites, the Tech Brothers himself and whoever else he's got. So this is what you have. You have unresolved grievances in MAGA. These are very angry people, okay? And they hold on to a lot of lies, a lot of false narratives, one being globalism is bad, one that there's a deep state. Okay. Yeah, it's a bunch of GS9s and 10s, like I said before, with a thickening middle, balding head. They got a mortgage and a wife and a couple kids in the suburbs. And the GS9s, 10s, 11s are trying to do their job. Okay, that's one false story, one grievance, one negative narrative, one disinformation line of attack. The deep state exists, and the deep state's after us. Okay, the other one is the 2020 election was rigged. Okay, Chris Krebs just been named by Trump to be investigated. Chris Krebs says there was no election rigging. I looked at the papers from Jack Smith. The election's not rigged, okay? There was no 2020 election wasn't rigged. The Democrats turned out at the bottom line. Okay, the judges are activists, wackos, liberals, because they don't rule the way Trump wants them to, the way MAGA's supposed to. There's fake news. The corporate media is all fake news, all fake news. So people don't listen to it. So you destroy a common narrative. All of this further divides the society in a way which makes union again in the society harder. Okay, and this is what the MAGA narrative is about. And Trump promotes these narratives that divide the society. Another lie is Trump is always right. So people will listen to Trump before they'll listen to generals or experts or wherever. They'll listen to Donald Trump, and he just wants to divide and divide. And division helps the tyrants of the world, and it helps the reordering of the world to a point where it's devolution, where the unity we've been approaching is going to be broken apart. There's going to be more poverty, more wars, less human rights, a lot more suffering. Okay, so MAGA is loyal to Trump. They listen to the talking points that come out from Trump. The talking points also come out on social media through Elon Musk, through X. I'm watching this. He sends them out what people are supposed to think. But there's a lot of darkness that comes from Trump. He's a very dark individual. Very dark. He's evil. Malignant personality, it's been called. He's a narcissist, malignant narcissist. I think that's correct. But he is one who is only interested in himself. He is a lawless individual. He doesn't care about law or right or wrong. He just uses everything and everybody. He uses religion, he uses ethnicity, and he uses these things for his own power. He doesn't want to help anybody. He just simply wants his own power to stay in place. And so he uses these things, and people don't see that, and they don't understand that. People who question him, well, they're said to have Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, I've been called a number of people. Good friends have said this to me. Former good friends have said this to me. And so what this is a communist tactic. Well, you disagree, with the fearless leader. Well, there's something wrong with you mentally and emotionally. Obviously. Well, this is tyranny. This is a technique of tyranny. And the lies, the false narratives, the disinformation narratives I just told you about are part of this tyranny. Okay, so I told you characteristics of MAGA. I told you these are people got unresolved grievances deep inside, and they are projecting these grievances on some cause, on some person, on the elites, and they listen to Trump and they say, "Well, whoa, Trump is a revenger in chief. He says he's going to take care of it all." So they attach a very dark attachment. Very, very, very bad for the country. Okay. A lot of the MAGA people, they're angry, they're vindictive, they're filled with just rage. They have stunted intellects, they have stunted personalities. They're limited in what they can do, a lot of them. Okay. They're anti elite, they're anti expert, but not for Steve Byron or Peter Navarro. And like I said, or I may have indicated, Patrick Deneen seems to have fallen into this, and I'm stunned. He said, "Well, see, the economists were wrong. The tariffs." Well, no, the economists are saying you need these ridiculous tariffs that are hurting our treasury markets and causing a loss of trust and confidence in the United States by our allies. And Patrick Deneen apparently doesn't see that in some of his tweets, or rejects that. But that's because, and I'm digressing, skipping it. That's because he, like other people who want to build a following, or it's important to them that their ideas get play. It's important to them that they be looked at as somebody, because these guys like Deneen, they got pride, and there's a lot like them, and they think they have something important to say. And so these people are going to play to this crowd, which rewards them. And what happens is if you say things that the crowd likes, the crowd lets you know. Same thing as if you say things on social media or elsewhere that the Russian trolls and bots like, they let you know. Okay? So this is very clever what the Russians are doing, especially on social media. So there are certain messages that they amplify with their likes, their bots, and there are other messages that they attack. If you say the wrong thing, they attack you, or you don't get the algorithms to play your game, and so you just get shunted off to the side. So, in order for a lot of these so-called thought leaders, self-appointed thought leaders, chatters, so-called researchers, I call them professional conservatives or professional Catholics, in order for them to thrive, and they all think they have something important to say, in order for them to thrive, they have to appeal to the crowd, which oftentimes is a bunch of Russian trolls and bots. Okay. All right. So the MAGA thinks that they know things better than everyone else. They're poorly informed. They don't know how things work. They resist being educated. they enjoy the dark, false negatives narratives. There's something in them that just feeds on negative stuff, whatever it is. Um, okay, many of them are of European descent, and have are of a lower socioeconomic class, and so a lot of them are very much ethnic American. They dislike rules, they dislike law, they dislike structures. Um, I think a lot of them, not most of them, not all of them, are anti-globalist. I think that they or and what they you know they're against this thing globalist and globalism. I think a lot of them have real personality problems. They're incapable of being friendly. They're incapable of being sociable, of getting along with people. I think they're very limited in what they can do. Um, and a lot of them make very sweeping conclusions, and they simply lost the reason. With one person, which I'm going to get back to again, one person we had this discussion about the United Nations USAID, and he's saying, "Yeah, I'm all glad shut down USAID. Oh, the UN is bad." Yeah, I said, "Why shut down USAID? Because it's all about population control." I said, "No, it's not all about population control. It's about medicine. It's about food. It's about soft power. It's about helping people on the ground. And you're shutting, 1% of the U.S. budget down, which had enormous benefits for this country. You're going to shut that down? Yeah, I mean, this is irrational. What you're saying, it's irrational, and that's because they have an agenda in their mind, okay, which is divisive and harmful to this country and doesn't understand how things work. And so now, who's filling the space of USAID? It's China and Russia. Everybody knows that. And this is hurting us overseas. Okay, so then the next thing, of course, is the UN. They always say, "Oh, UN, oh, the UN, it's terrible. They're trying to do horrible things to us." And I'm going, wait a minute. Have you heard of the four pillars? Do you know what that's about? Do you know how countries are working together, how they improve law and development and human rights and peace and all the things that they've done over all of this time? Yeah, but they're pushing an education agenda. They're not pushing any education agenda down. They don't have that power. The countries at the UN come together. They all agree on certain things. That doesn't mean they're going to implement them. They may set certain standards, but each country is free to accept it or not, as they may see. And then, of course, Ukraine. I had this conversation with this one guy, clearly MAGA, and I said, Russia broke the law. It invaded Ukraine. That's immoral. It's against the law. He said, well, that's how all wars start. And Ukraine's corrupt, so we shouldn't help them. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I mean, we have laws. You can't let people break laws and act immorally. So they have trouble processing more complicated ideas, and they're fed very simple stories and dark narratives that play to their emotions, and that's very very negative and very bad. Um, they reject structures. They make sweeping conclusions. Um, and I think that's the characteristics of it. I want to go into some further characteristics and some things that actually I came to understand over the last few weeks um, from a variety of different reasons, just simply observing and being and attending a couple of ceremonies and things like that. And what struck me was that MAGA, and hence Trump and his cronies, used the language and the fanaticism of the culture wars, of the pro-life movement, the anti-gay rights movement that attacked judges. I see that now, and I understand that, and I go back now to the '90s, and I guess I got involved in the pro-life movement late '90s, and I can see some of the themes that were present there that are being reproduced now on the national stage for the benefit of Trump and to the harm of this country by Trump and MAGA. And so this to me is very fascinating. I also had an occasion to go to a traditional Latin Mass ceremony at a traditional Latin Mass um, um, parish. And I realized as I looked around, I realized as I thought back over all the years how the Latin Mass has been, and those communities have been a breeding ground, quite honestly. They've been a breeding ground for a lot of dissatisfaction, a lot of dark narratives, a lot of dissension, a lot of disloyalty. and a lot of conflict and grievance. And this has simply intensified and increased over time. And a lot of people that I see, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but it seems that the traditional Catholics, the TLM Catholics, traditional Anabaptist Catholics, are in large measure MAGAs. They believe in these narratives that are simply not true. These dark narratives that paint America as the bad guy all the time, and that are sympathetic to Putin and Russia and autocracy and other things that are against everything America's for and everything that's going to guarantee peace and the development of the person. So this is what I've noticed is that the whole MAGA movement is using this language of the pro-life movement, the culture wars. And one area it comes out is the radical leftist wacko judges. These activist judges. I mean, we heard that all the time during the pro-life movement, and this has been weaponized now to create greater divisions. It's been weaponized against the judiciary, against the rule of law in this country by Trump and his cronies. Um, the result of all this is that well, let me get to that a little later. Okay, so the MAGA, to include a lot of these, TLM Catholics and traditional Catholics, lose sight of America and American exceptionalism. They reject, and I've written about American exceptionalism. It's on the website. You can read the article, and that's just part of it. There's more, which I've come to see as I've researched America and as I've studied America. So what you see is this group, this MAGA with all of its little subgroups, rejects human rights. They're very insular. They're very isolationist. They lack friendship or sociability. They're very crude. They reject anyone who's against them. They're tribalistic. They don't like civil society, which means that you have to have a certain level of friendship and intellectual acuity to deal with things. They are for authoritarianism. They're for tyranny. They're insular, they're isolationists, like I said, and they always talk about being nationalists. Well, I mean, Putin and the Russians, through disinformation, have been pushing some form of nationalism in all the countries of Europe and in this country. And as in one of my talks with Mr. Rutovich, we talked about Bannon's ties with Dugin. Well, I mean, Tucker Carlson's a big fan of Dugin too, apparently. And what you have is you have a lot of people who think that Dugin is the way. He's got the ideas. Alexander Dugin's got the ideas, and we should follow him. And so these ideas are anathema to America. They are opposed to America. They're doctrinal warfare. They're ideological warfare. And if somebody knows anything about doctrinal or ideological warfare, it's me. So what's happening here is doctrinal and ideological warfare is being waged against the United States by the Russians through these ideas of nationalism that takes root in MAGA and a bunch of professional conservatives, professional Catholics of all types, chatters, people who are opinion influencers, social media. All of these ideas are pushed out there and repeated over and over again, along with disinformation narratives, false, incomplete, out of context narratives meant to divide. So all this is going on at the same time, and these people, MAGA, with all their little subgroups, have fallen in line. And they've really become, I believe, a very dangerous movement in this country because they see their fellow American as the real enemy. I mean, we're under attack. We're under attack. And MAGA is a tool of a foreign power to effect this attack on America. There's the evidence is there. And so, what we have to do, if we're going to stop this division, which is going to hurt everybody, and not just divide the country and get us out of world affairs, but also make us poorer and angrier at each other, what we have to do is we have to take control of these falsehoods. We have to recognize what's happening. We have to shut down the lies. And we have to come together as Americans, and we have to understand we are under attack, and the enemy doesn't like us. And what unites us, and I've said this in other forums, what unites us is we're all from the same piece of dirt. We all live on the same piece of dirt. We may come from many different groups, many different peoples, okay? E pluribus unum, right? But we are one. And we are one because of this dirt. And what is essential to making this work is sociability, friendship. Okay, this is something the American founders talked about. It's something even the social scientists and the lawyers and the theologians have talked about over the years. This is friendship. for your fellow countrymen. I've written about this too. It's on the website. It's about patriotism. And you can read that too. You got to have patriotism, which means you got to love your fellow man and stop this endless demonization of liberals or, Republicans or whoever there is out there. And we have to get rid of these dark narratives and we have to work together. So, I mentioned, the whole Catholic thing. I mentioned Catholics because I mean, in the last few weeks, I've really had a number of run-ins with professional Catholics. I mean, these are guys who wear, Catholic on their sleeve. They have their institute that does research or teach or they write books or sell magazines or whatever. I mean, they do something that is designed to say to the world, "Hey, look at me, I'm a Catholic, and I know, being Catholic." And so I came to become acquainted with these people over the years, and I'm watching them as they support, um, as they support Trump and they support tyranny and as they support this dark evil man who lies all the time. And what I should say too is I talk about professional Catholics. It also applies, to a lot of professional conservatives, a lot of other professionals, professional Protestants, whatever. I mean, it probably applies to a lot of people who are in line with MAGA, who are in line with Trump. Okay, so I'm just going to single out, um, also for purposes of illustration, the Catholic group that I've dealt with. I'm not going to list any names. I'm not going to name any names. There's at least a dozen people I run into. I don't want to promote them. I don't want to give people the wrong idea. Um, okay, so um, like I said, these are self-appointed thought leaders, chatters, researchers. They're all commissars. They they support they support Trump and everything he's doing because Trump, has a photo of him and his wife next to a cross, or Trump is holding up a Bible, or Trump says there's two genders, or Trump says I'm for traditional values, and so yeah, we just fall in line with that one, So they don't really get the bigger picture. They don't understand, and why is that? Because a lot of their clientele, a lot of their followers, a lot of their future, a lot of their profit, a lot of their fame and their fortune comes from MAGA. Okay, a lot of these people who read their stuff are MAGA. They're dissatisfied. Okay, they're unhappy. They got a grievance. Okay, something's wrong with the church. They did away with the traditional Latin liturgy. I'm mad. Why? So this anger, this grievance just continues in these people. But these professional Catholics can cater to it. They identify their markets. Years ago, I said, the Catholics are just a big market, and you got rhetorical warlords. These rhetorical warlords have niches. They have segments of the market. They sell their books to. Oh, this one talks about liturgy. This one talks about architecture. This one talks about culture. This, and almost all of them they talk about sex, right? They talk about sex one way or another. That's your Catholic bona fides. You got to talk about sex. And like I joked with somebody the other day, I mean, Catholic theology, left to these people, these professional Catholic chatterers, boils down to three body parts: the penis, the vagina, and the anus. That's basically Catholic theology, according to these people. Okay, so these people are very much intent on keeping their base, and they know their base likes Trump because of these grievances. So they're not gonna disturb. They're not gonna disturb what's going to happen. Um, so they're always about criticism. They're always about condemnation. Always dark narratives, usually false or incomplete. Just they're easy targets to spread disinformation. I think the Russians know that. I've talked about that in previous talks, and they may not know it's disinformation, or they may know. I mean, some may be getting paid. I don't know. But that's definitely worth looking into. But certainly, some of the messages coming out of Russia about traditional values, that's disinformation. That's doctrinal warfare, psyops, and some of these professional Catholics and professional conservatives pick it up and run with it. They say, "Hey, this is great. Yeah, right. This is what we want." Um, they sow these professional Catholics are always so and professional conservatives, the MAGA leaders, are always sowing division and hatred. It's always name calling. It's always a form of intimidation. And what's going on is they're actually playing into identity politics. The professional Catholics are creating this Catholic identity above all else, to the exclusion of your fellow countrymen, which is wrong. Okay, and then you got some of the conservatives who say, well, you're MAGA above all else, or you're conservative above all else. And that is a division, dividing of the people, dividing of the country. They're not interested in bringing people together. They're just interested in attacking and throwing stones. So what's the motivation? I've mentioned this before. A lot of these professional Catholics, professional conservatives, these are people who are deeply disordered. All of them are narcissists. They got to have a crowd. They got to have people looking at them. They do it for money. They do it for fame. A lot of them are low class. They're just malicious. They hate America. There's some disorder in their life. Again, many of them have a grievance in their life that's unresolved. A lot of times it's substance abuse. A lot of times it's sexual matters that are unresolved. And a lot of them just have hatred. Like I said, they have hatred against America and other people. They don't really care. Um, so my next thing um, is they violate their own teaching. And what I want to do is talk very briefly about something I received the other day. Let's see if I got it here. Yeah, okay. So the um, the professional Catholics in particular, almost without exception, and once again, I talk professional Catholics, not all of them. There are exceptions. Without exception, the professional Catholics do not want to change hearts. They don't want to convert people, because they don't have love in their own hearts. Okay, and so somebody sent me this thing, which I think is pretty accurate from what I read about history. What did resistance to a violent empire look like in the first century with Christians? One, faithfulness to Christ as King and no other, gathering together regularly to share meals, caring for the stranger, the widows, and the poor, living with joy and gratitude despite circumstances, repaying evil with good, practicing generosity towards the needy and the sick, showing kindness to their enemies, refusing to compromise the idols, choosing simplicity over excess, praying daily with persistence. Okay, and always working out of love to convert people, to lead by example. Well, that's not the case with a lot of these professional Catholics and professional conservatives and so on and so forth. I mean, I will tell you that these guys they act in ways that are troubling. They announce doctrines that go against, America. You got one guy. I don't think this is any secret. Jack Posobiec, basically says we're going to end democracy. And I have that. I have the clip. If you want to look at it, it is on the American Proposition Facebook page. Another guy whose name I'm not going to say attacked me because I posted saying Donald Trump is a criminal. He's a convicted felon. He attacked me almost right away. Because, see, that's one of the lies that is important for MAGA. That lawfare was used to convict Trump. He's clean and pure as the driven snow. He's just an honest man. This is all lies. Well, no, he's a convicted felon. And he's also been found culpable in a number of civil suits. Okay, I mean, this is not a good guy. Okay, well, anyways, this well-known professional Catholic attacked me, and he wanted me to recant. I'm going, no, I'm not gonna, do that. That's the reality. Okay, um, you have some outlets. I'm going to say it. Lifesite News, I believe, repeats Russian disinformation. At least some of the narratives that the Russians put out about NATO and about a lot of other things. And then what you have is, as an example of dividing the society, you have people. I'm going to name her name, Candace Owens, who's really encouraging, revisionist history, and at the same time attacking Jews. And if and despite what these people say, whatever, despite what Owens and those of lesser ilk say, what they're doing is they are encouraging hatred of Jews. Okay, and that's against their own church's teaching. And if you hate people, The problem is you become like them. So this is a way to divide. It's a way to cause all sorts of problems in history, and it's meant to weaken the United States. Okay, hatred is meant to weaken the United States. So okay, so what do they all do when they're all doing this? They're actually advancing tyranny. They're advancing this rule that's arbitrary, that Vladimir Putin represents. That's bloody. That's horrific. And they're advancing something that their own church has condemned. And having studied law, Francisco Suarez, the Jesuit, described tyranny, and he says it's wrong. Okay, well, just even to the layman, tyranny's a bad thing. Okay. They deny the person. They deny the person. They're denying the development of the person because that's what tyranny does. And so when they're not trying to convert people and they're just attacking them and they keep society divided and they provide these false narratives, which are, I might add, against Intermerifica, which I know a little bit. When they provide these false narratives, many professional Catholics, many professional conservatives, many others in MAGA, they're violating Intermerifica, their own teaching. They're violating some solid ideas to defend against disinformation. Disinformation is real. It's harmful. It's my latest article on the American Proposition website. You need to read it. Okay, they don't have love in their hearts. They're not trying to convert. Religion, church is a weapon. It's a tool. Church is a market, with different warlords. By doing all of this, they're supporting a foreign agenda, and they seem to be okay with that. And it's one that weakens this country because they're advancing division in the society, which is what the Russians want, and the Chinese want that too. But the Russians, in particular, they want division in this society, and these people are not bringing us together. They're not recognizing they're under attack. Once you recognize you're under attack, you have to come together. Okay, you have to come together and fight the enemy together. Okay, that's essential. And if you don't, then you're wrong. I mean, we can have good faith discussions, good faith disagreements, but once the enemy appears, as somebody told me many years ago, we may fight among ourselves. We may have our disagreements, but once the enemy appears, especially when that's a foreign enemy, and that we are confronted with a foreign enemy right now, and that is Russia and China, we need to unify. We need to come together. We need to fight them. Okay, so where's all this going? Where's all this support for MAGA going? It's dangerous to speculate. But I think you're going to lose souls. I think you're going to lose credibility if you're of the religious Christian kind. I think you're going to end up discrediting the Catholic brand in time, because Trump's not going to last forever. He's going to be gone. His movement will disappear someday. The idea of ethnicity and religion and traditional values it's already being tarnished by Putin and by and CCP, and the same is going to happen over here. Um, and I think there's going to need to be a massive re you know a massive effort to get people to understand better what is going on, to understand the good, to come together, to embrace civic society and civil society, to be friends again, to work together, and to understand the benefits and the positive aspects of this society of America, which is, as I've said before, you have liberalism at one level, which allows different viewpoints, and federalism, which allows these different communities that govern and act together, all for the benefit of people. But what we have to do first and foremost is have a resurgence of patriotism. Patriotism is what's going to save our country and save all of us. And actually, I think it's going to save the world and keep a good, solid world order in place that's been peaceful and prosperous. It needs some tweaking, sure, but it has also allowed for the rule of law, the advancement of human rights, and most importantly, the proper development of the person. That's all I got for today. It's a long one. Thanks.